The strangest turn in Highlander's 18-year journey never happened in front of a camera. It happened quietly, behind closed doors, months before filming ever began. The moment Lionsgate chose to walk away from a project it had spent years nurturing. By then, Henry Cavill was locked in as the lead. Chad Stahelski was already attached to direct. The production was inching toward reality, and still, Lionsgate let it slip through its fingers.
Sources close to the situation who spoke with The Wrap suggest the fallout boiled down to two things in nearly equal weight: cost and confidence. Stahelski was pushing for a budget near $180 million, the same fearless scale of investment that transformed John Wick from a modest thriller into a genre-defining empire. Lionsgate, meanwhile, wanted the number closer to $165 million. On its own, that $15 million gap might have been bridgeable, but the real fracture ran deeper. The studio wasn't sure Highlander could even justify spending at that level in the first place. According to those same sources, Lionsgate viewed the built-in fan base as small and graying, largely composed of viewers who remembered the 1986 original rather than a fresh modern audience ready to fill theaters. A cult favorite carrying a blockbuster-sized price tag looked, to the studio, like a gamble not worth taking. Then came the harder, less comfortable question, the one fans rarely want to hear but studios weigh constantly. Outside his role as Superman, several of Cavill's leading vehicles have stumbled badly at the box office. The Man from UNCLE, The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, and the $200 million misfire Argyle. Each one was designed to launch him into franchise stardom. Each one landed with a thud instead. Lionsgate, reportedly, had little appetite left to gamble another nine-figure budget purely on his solo box office pull. Factor in the studio still nursing losses from Borderlands and the 2024 reboot of The Crow, along with persistent whispers that Lionsgate itself might be quietly shopped as an acquisition target and passing on an expensive, niche piece of intellectual property starts to look less like a misstep and more like calculated self-preservation. That was the exact moment Amazon MGM stepped through the open door, moving under its United Artists banner and guided by former Netflix film chief Scott Stuber. In April 2025, the company didn't just pick up the movie, it acquired the entire Highlander franchise outright. This wasn't a single risky swing for Amazon. It was the purchase of an entire mythology, one with the potential to expand into a connected television universe. Echoing the very playbook that turned John Wick into a sprawling world rather than a simple trilogy, where Lionsgate had seen only a frightening budget. Attached to a shrinking niche property, Amazon saw decades of dormant lore just waiting to be unearthed and rebuilt. And if this film performs the way early reactions are already suggesting, Lionsgate's decision to walk away may end up looking like one of the costliest missed opportunities of the entire decade, a warning about what happens when caution outweighs vision. This particular film didn't simply take a while to get made, it spent nearly 2 full decades trapped in development purgatory. Summit Entertainment first floated the idea of a reboot back in 2008, then let the concept sit dormant for years without meaningful movement. Ryan Reynolds was briefly attached at one stage before quietly exiting in 2013. Stahelski himself boarded the project in 2016, arriving fresh off the explosive success of the original John Wick. Yet even he couldn't get the wheels turning, largely because he refused to bend on the budget he believed the story deserved. That very standoff is what eventually pushed the rights out of Lionsgate's hands entirely. Cavill signed on to play the lead in 2021, but it wasn't until Amazon and United Artists formally took control in 2025 that the financing and the creative ambition finally arrived in the same room at the same time. Even after that alignment, the production kept finding new ways to stumble. Filming was originally slated to begin in the fall of 2025, but Cavill tore something in his leg during pre-production training. The kind of injury that comes from genuinely punishing physical preparation, not from letting a stunt double absorb the workload. Deadline broke the story first, and Cavill later shared a recovery update of his own on Instagram, posting workout photos with his leg still wrapped in a boot, framing the setback as motivation rather than defeat. Cameras finally started rolling on January 28, 2026, in Scotland, a milestone marked with a pair of first-look photographs shared on social media. Then came CinemaCon in April, the moment that finally justified every year of waiting. Amazon MGM unveiled early footage exclusively for theater owners in Las Vegas, introduced by Cavill himself over a video call straight from the set, dirt still visible on his face mid-shoot. The reel opened with Connor MacLeod introducing himself as a man born in 1518 who simply cannot die, before cutting straight into a neon-drenched brawl inside a packed, pulsing rave. Motorcycle chases and sword duels unfolded with the same obsessive, meticulous precision that made John Wick the modern gold standard for action filmmaking, all set to the pounding rhythm of Queen's We Will Rock You. Bautista's. Kurgan shared one menacing exchange with Connor before the footage closed on multiple characters delivering the franchise's iconic line about there being only one-dot exhibitors. Industry veterans who sit through hundreds of studio reels every single year and rarely react to any of them, were reportedly buzzing with genuine excitement once the lights came back up. That kind of reaction doesn't happen by accident. Jaded trade professionals don't fake enthusiasm, and they certainly don't manufacture it for a franchise they've already written off in their minds. Some of that excitement only makes sense once you remember exactly what made the original film work in the first place. A 500-year-old Scottish warrior hiding in modern-day Manhattan, locked in combat with other immortals in a tournament where only beheading brings death. Every victory unleashing a surge of power known as the Quickening. On paper, it reads as deeply silly, and the movie did, in fact, flop hard in theaters upon release. What transformed it into a cult classic on home video instead was the way Christopher Lambert refused to play Connor as some kind of power fantasy. He played a man being slowly, quietly worn down by the passage of time, watching his own wife, Heather, grow old and die while he remained frozen exactly as he was. Exiled by his own clan because his survival looked demonic rather than divine, his immortality was never framed as a gift. It was a punishment, simply wearing the costume of a superpower. Stahelski clearly understands that this emotional core is the piece worth protecting above everything else. He's described Connor as the character who would least want the life he's been given. Someone carrying 5 centuries of lethal combat skill and 5 centuries of psychological damage in almost equal measure. It's the very same philosophy that made John Wick resonate so deeply, where grief and mythology carry genuine emotional weight long before a single punch is ever thrown on screen. Cinematographer Dan Laustsen, who shot both John Wick 3 and John Wick 4, is back behind the camera once again, and the high contrast, neon-soaked visual style already glimpsed in the CinemaCon footage is unmistakably his signature at work. For Cavill, personally, the appeal was never about playing some effortlessly cool guy swinging a cool sword. It was about embodying a tragic warrior carrying a real, aching story beneath all the action. He reportedly wanted to explore the franchise's lore more deeply than any previous version had attempted, training extensively in swordsmanship, driving, motorcycles, and firearms to get there. Given his established track record on The Witcher, where he handled the majority of his own fight choreography rather than leaving it entirely to a stunt double, that dedication should genuinely show up on screen rather than getting smoothed. Away in the editing room, Russell Crowe steps into the mentor role of Ramirez, a part made iconic by Sean Connery in the original. And the choice everyone can't stop discussing is that Crowe is reportedly playing him with a full Spanish accent rather than echoing Connery's version at all. Stahelski apparently encouraged him to bring whatever felt authentic to the character's actual roots, rather than simply trading on nostalgia for its own sake. Crowe confirmed at the Taormina Film Festival in June that he had wrapped his portion of the shoot, calling the film fantastic and insisting Stahelski is simply incapable of making something dull. Dave Bautista as the Kurgan may be the single casting decision that rewards the deepest consideration. Clancy Brown's original portrayal worked because he felt genuinely dangerous, even while standing perfectly still, as though detonation was always just one heartbeat away. Bautista has already proven he can deliver exactly that brand of quiet, simmering menace. His portrayal of Raban in Dune never needed to tip into cartoonish villainy to feel deeply unsettling. He's spoken publicly in praise of this script since well before filming even began, and interestingly, he was actually in talks to play the Kurgan a full decade earlier, for an entirely different, ultimately scrapped Highlander attempt developed under Summit with a different director attached, making this version feel like a decade-late payoff. On a personal level for him, Karen Gillan takes on the role of Heather, Connor's first wife, filming the medieval flashback sequences at the breathtaking Donan Castle, using her own genuine Scottish accent and making that lost. Love feel real is essentially what everything else in the film has to build toward emotionally. Siobhan Cullen plays Brenda, reimagined here as a police psychiatrist rather than the original's forensic scientist. A smart, deliberate update, since a psychiatrist confronting a man whose story quietly implies centuries of accumulated loss makes for a far richer narrative entry point than a lab technician ever could. Jeremy Irons joins the cast as the leader of the Watchers, a secret society drawn from the 90s television series rather than the original film, secretly pursuing the very source of immortal power for its own hidden purposes. That addition gives the overall story a second, independent threat operating on its own internal logic, separate entirely from the Kurgan. The real difference between a single standalone action movie and the true beginning of an expansive fictional world. The rest of the ensemble rounds out that world further. Maria Abella plays an immortal swordplay instructor and love interest rather than the archaeologist from the original. Early rumors suggest Kevin McKidd has taken on an undisclosed role, having nearly landed the lead role itself back in 2009. Nassim Lias and John Jong-seo fill out the remaining Immortal and Watcher ranks, while Jong Jin-young, credited under the name Max Jen, marks his third Hollywood role and his third on-screen pairing opposite Bautista specifically, following Escape Plan, The Extractors, and Master Z, The Ip Man Legacy. Drew McIntyre plays Angus, Connor's own brother, the very man who personally carried out his exile, and that detail is genuinely worth sitting with. The person responsible for condemning Connor to centuries of isolation wasn't some enemy from outside. It was his own blood. Filming has stretched across Scotland, London, Hong Kong, and Poland, with Italian locations also reportedly involved. And the screenplay carries writing credits from Ryan J. Condal, Kerry Williamson, and Michael Finch, the very same writer behind John Wick. Chapter 4. Industry estimates currently place the release sometime in the back half of 2027, with a slip into 2028 not entirely out of the question. Nobody fights for 18 years to make a movie they don't genuinely believe in, and a room full of jaded industry veterans doesn't keep discussing footage they'd already forgotten the second they walked out.